welcome to How to Fit Things. This is Kathy Hay, who you probably know already. This is Barbara Paisendorfer of Royal Black Couture, who is a fantastically skilled, highly trained tailor and corset maker. She makes absolutely beautiful work. Barbara is here today with Kathy, who is going to be our fit model because Kathy has a jacket that needs tailoring. And so we thought we would film this process of Barbara doing the tailoring, walking you through what changes she's going to make, why, what changes are common, how to fix the things, because this is obviously something that if you're into dressing historically or dressing sustainably, you're going to thrift shops and secondhand places and buying things that look nice but don't necessarily magically, miraculously fit you perfectly, and will probably need some alterations. So we are going to help you with that.
So here's what we have.
This is
a jacket that I bought at a thrift store. I mean, many people when they start history banding, dressing historically, they think that it involves, you've got to make an entire new wardrobe now. And it's not the case. You can buy things or thrift things and either customize them or fit them to you. So it's possible, and I think a lot of people do this, to buy a pretty nice jacket that seems a bit big and tailor it to fit. I chose it because I like the fabric, I like the cut. From what I know about sewing and dressmaking, because I've done this before, but not necessarily very well, is that I wanted something that fit well up here, around the shoulders, because the shoulders and the sleeves and all of this area, that's complex if you're trying to fit it. You've got to take the sleeves out and fiddle about. So if it fits up here, then you're off to a good start.
But if you do have to take the sleeves out,
yes,
Foundations Revealed has a free workshop out now. Tell you all about drafting and altering and setting sleeves.
So I think I've got it right up here.
As you already said, I think it's the most important thing when you thrift jackets or tailored garments, that the shoulder area fits nicely. So the shoulder seam should end with your upper arm here. This area shouldn't be too high or too low or too wide or too small, because it's very complex to adjust this. You would have to take out the entire sleeve, the shoulder pads, all the structure that has been worked into it. It would take probably just as long as completely making a new jacket. So if you can find a jacket that fits nicely around the shoulder but is too tight or too wide at the bottom area, that's something that can be made to fit nicely. Whilst when you have, for example, the shoulder sitting here, then it is a huge project to
too wide
adjust
or
it.
Tight when you do this.
So I would suggest to put on the jacket, move around, see how you feel around the shoulders, if you have enough room for movement. A lot of garments can also look nicely when the top button is open and you have a nice scarf. Then you gain a bit of extra room of movement around the shoulders, so you can work around this issue if you really fall in love with a garment and want to use it anyway. Another tip I would give is to look for garments that are a bit wider if possible, because it's always easier to take in clothes than to let out, because you might have not enough fabric in the seam allowances to actually add fabric. So if you find a jacket and it's too wide, it's much easier to adjust that to your measurements compared to a garment that is very tight, but there's still a few things we can do. So I feel altogether you have done quite well with choosing this jacket. When you try it on, it's important to close the buttons to really get an idea of the fit, because if you leave it open, you have no idea how wide or tight it sits. What I'm looking for, how tight it is in the hips. I would say your jacket is on the tighter end. So it might be a bit difficult to alter that, but we could work around that again with opening the button and give it a bit more room, because I just try to feel if there is any extra fabric in the seam allowances that we could let out. But I don't think there is much in this jacket, so we don't really have the option to make it wider. But it has a slit in the back, which helps us to work around this issue a bit. And if you leave the bottom button open, we also gain a bit more room of movement. We definitely can take it in around the waist, because it looks, as you said, quite boxy there. And I will show you how to take out a bit of ease and where to do that best. We can also see that there is a lot of wrinkles here. The issue with these wrinkles in general is that the top area is too long. We can't do much about that, but we might be able to fix it a bit by taking out some width here and maybe also a tiny bit at the side seam. At least that will get rid of the extra amount of fabric here, because if this was a jacket that I would make from scratch, I would actually shorten the back a bit probably, and of course make the bottom wider so it doesn't sit on the hips and create these creases. But we'll do what we can to turn this into a lovely and well-fitting jacket for you.
Okay.
Another really important thing to look for when thrifting or looking for a second-hand jacket is the fit of the bust. If it's too tight in the bust, it's quite hard to do anything about that. You could take it in a bit if it's too wide. If the bust is under tension, that is hard to fix. So apart from the shoulders, it should also have enough room in the bust area. Again, we can cheat a bit by leaving the top button open, but if it's massively too small there, I probably would try to find a different jacket to make your life easier. So we decided to leave the top button open in your case, because if I try to pull here, we see that the jacket fits a bit too tight. And if I would close this button, we would have all kinds of pulls in the back. But if you have a jacket that fits looser at the top, please close all the buttons, because only then you will get an idea of the real fit of the jacket. But for this case, we will leave the top button open. We will close the waist button. I'm closing the bottom button for now, but we might also have to open it again because the hips are a bit too tight, but I'll see how far we can get with this. When I have the jacket on the model or on the person, the first thing I'm looking for how it sits in general. How are the shoulders fitting? I'm trying to feel where there is ease in the fabric that could be taken away, where it's tight, like here on the hips. Here in the back we can see a lot of wrinkles and extra fabric that we can work with. On the front, I think there isn't that much we can do because the lapel and collar, that should stay as it is, obviously. We don't want to mess with any of this. And it's quite tight around the bust, so there's not much we can do. But where we can make a bit of alterations is here in this area where we want to fit it closer to the body. I would look for the seams here, and then I use my fingers and try to feel where I can take out fabric. It's important not to take away too much because it's a jacket, not a corset. So there should be a bit room of movement. Also, it should fit to the rest of the jacket. We have a quite tight situation here, so I would probably also go tighter in the waist. But if you have a looser fit all over, then I would also leave more ease in the waist and in all other areas of the jacket. Once I have gotten an idea what I want to do, I would take pins and start pinning the excess width away.
And I'm trying to move my arm as little as possible, because if I raise my arm, it would completely change.
Very good point. You actually should let your arms hang down in the natural position, because we want the jacket to fit ideally in your natural position and posture, and not...
No good if it only fits one.
Wait, so this is why it's important to have other people fit you in your jackets.
Because if you try to fit on yourself, you will bend or have a kind of weird posture, and then the whole fit is distorted. So you have put your arm behind your back to help me, but I would ask you to put the arm back here, because otherwise you would pull the jacket to the back and
change the fit.
Yeah, what I actually would do if I tailor a jacket for myself and don't have anyone to help me fit it, I would put it on, check in the mirror where I see issues, take the jacket off, then guesstimate the adjustments, pin it, put it on again and see how it fits. But I wouldn't try to pin anything on myself because it is completely distorted. So it's a lot of taking on and off the garment to fit it on yourself it can be done, but it's a lot easier if you have someone to help you. If we compare the two sides, you can see, for one, it looks less boxy, and we also lost some of the wrinkling and ease of the fabric. So that is probably all I would suggest on the front, as we don't have any extra fabric we could take away, but we can do much more on the back, so I would ask you to turn around. As already mentioned, these creases here, I would say they issue from the hip being a bit too tight, so the fabric tends to ride up and gather here. We can't do much about that, but what we can do is taking in the jacket a bit at the small of the back. We remove some of the extra fabric here, even if it's not the perfect solution. We just try to work with what we have. And again, I would take the seam and pinch with my fingers first, trying to get a feeling how much I have to take away to remove the ease here, and then put some pins in to see what looks good.
And you're not pinning like right flat up against her back, are you? You're giving her a little bit of ease.
Yeah, there is. I mean, if you look at this, I could pin away as much as this, but for once we need a bit of ease for movement.
Yeah.
And I also might like to remove a bit on this seam, because otherwise we would pull the whole jacket to the back and cause all kind of issues in the front. The more seams you have, the more options you have to adjust and alter things without distorting the whole garment. If you're looking for a garment you want to fit closely, then it's nice to have more areas where...
Which is more difficult to find in menswear, because this is a men's jacket, isn't it?
Yeah, it is.
The top part here sits quite smoothly. I would start around here, because here is where we have extra width, and pin away some of it down to the waist. So I'm starting with a very small amount up here and going to a bigger amount in the waist. That is also an adjustment that can work really well for people with sway back posture, because in that case you have a kind of gap between the jacket and your spine, and taking out some fabric in the center back seam is a common adjustment that you can make, even if it's a jacket that you have bought newly for yourself, or if you're working on a pattern. That often helps to improve the fit for sway backs. So this has already gotten rid of some of the wrinkles, but we still have a bit of fabric here. I wouldn't take out too much here, because you need it for moving your arms. That is another reason why I wouldn't take out a lot of fabric here, because even if it's a bit loose, you will be grateful for this ease, so you can move your arms. But we can take in a little bit here, and I probably only would do it on the back panel in this case, not on the panel under the arm, because we already have taken this one in at the front seam. The front and side is quite tight already, so I probably only would take away a small piece on the back panel. In general, if you're not asymmetrical, you only have to pin one side. If you're not that experienced, it will be easier to pin both sides and trying to get it symmetrical. To give you a better idea of the fit, I usually only pin one side.
See, that's the master tailor talking. I would always pin both sides, just because I'd be afraid of pinning in too much on one side.
Yeah.
Because I'm making sure they're even.
Yeah, you have to make sure that the center back stays in the center back and center front in the center front. Doing it on both sides is probably more beginner friendly. One issue we can't really fix is this area. It is because the shoulder is a bit low, so if we would raise the shoulder, it would smooth out. But
could I maybe put a pad in there?
We could pad a bit in this area, because you have quite sloping shoulders. I would add a bit of padding here, because then it doesn't fall down like this if we raise it here. Another thing that we could try altering a bit is the sleeve. It's quite wide compared to the rest of the jacket. It's not super wide for a normal jacket, but since this is very tightly fitted, we might want to take in the sleeve as well. And we have these elbow patches on this sleeve and the buttons down here, so I would probably work on the inner seam in this case, because there is no decoration or buttons that are in the way and that we have to work around. I wouldn't take out too much up here because that distorts the fit here, but we can go a bit smaller at the elbow and down to the wrist. So I would let it go into the seam up here. And from the elbow we could go down in a straight line. 8 millimeter I would take out on both sides of the seam. So depending if you would want to work on this top stitched area as well, you could go in a straight line, but you could also let it fade out above the hem of the sleeve to make your life a bit easier. Please don't go too small when fitting sleeves, because otherwise it will get very uncomfortable and hard to bend your arms.
You're gonna have a lot of movement here.
Yeah, you need movement.
Yeah.
So if you move and the sleeve is too tight, the elbow would stretch over time, and then it doesn't look nice anymore if you have the arm hanging down.
Well, thank you very much.
I think that's the best we can do.
Fitting properly. So,
To
when we start doing these alterations, where do we begin in actually doing it? Do I open this from the outside, or
we go in from the inside, of course, so you have to take off.
Unless we've pinned me to the...
Have we?
This is
Yeah,
the
we
inevitability of all fitting situations.
Yes, it always happens. We have pinned through the lining here, obviously. So one of the first things you can do is using basting thread and tracing the alterations you have made. So you would remove one pin after the other and baste along the line you have pinned.
Just a little running stitch to mark where the pins
to
were.
mark where the pins were and how much you want to take out, and then you can remove the pins. Then I would look at the lining to find out where is the easiest way to open it to get access to the inside. Some modern jackets, they have just sewn the side seam closed from the outside, then it's super easy to remove that, and you don't have to go from the bottom or anywhere else. So I would also open the side seam of the jacket, probably like this, unpick this seam, and then you can access the fabric from the inside.
Yes.
You will see the running stitch marking, and then you can take away that amount from the inside. Then you have to try if you can reach all other seams you want to adjust from this opening. Usually it's the best if you have less openings, because you don't want to
save some work,
Like surgery.
And when you're done with the alterations, don't forget pressing the seams. Really important. Always press your seams, otherwise it will look not very smooth and clean. You have to press it open from the inside, and then you can close the
Well, this is
lining.
pressed and then it's also top stitched, right?
Yeah. So in this case you would actually have to unpick the top stitching before you can alter the seam. Then you have to do your adjustment, and then you can try to top stitch along the new seam. When you're working on the sleeves, I would turn the sleeve around. Here we can actually see that the lining has been stitched close by machine from the outside. Here it is just top stitched together, and it would be quite easy to unpick this seam here. Then you can access the sleeve and work on the sleeve seam, and afterwards you can either beautifully close it by hands or use the same method they had in this jacket and top stitch it by machine. Don't forget pressing. Pressing is 50% of making a garment.
Wow. Huzzah! So we have a pinned jacket now. Kathy has all the information she needs now to go off and make these alterations and come back with a wonderfully fitted jacket. I hope that was of interest. I hope that was helpful. Yes, you can have fantastic clothes that fit. Having clothes altered, I feel like, is a highly underrated thing nowadays. We just assume that we're gonna buy stuff off the high street and it's gonna fit-ish. And we'll just wear it. But it makes such a difference to have your clothes fit specifically to you, whether or not you can do it yourself or if you take it to someone to have it done.